effort were all it took to create change, we would be in a different place. The Nova Scotia mass killing and numerous police killings were so public at a time of such vulnerability, it was as though we were again in a circle, in our rocking chairs, listening deeply to these stories that wanted to be heard to speech. Perhaps pandemic stories are activating our deep belief in the inherent dignity and worth of people in a new way, renewing our dreams of ending oppression and rekindling deeper understanding of systemic forces that subjugate, enslave, and colonize humans. While many, many white people recognize racism and sexism as an injustice, what supports the effort required to understand what maintains that injustice? Privilege puts us on the on-ramp to better education, better paying jobs, living in comfortable, sacred spaces. Can comfortable, compassionate, privileged, principled people demystify systemic sexism and racism and explore decolonization? An apparently scary word for folks with privilege is decolonization. Let's demystify 3 scary words: privilege, colonization, and decolonization. Decolonizing our minds takes these scary words in a story and by taking us on a journey helps discover how to conquer our fears. That's why many adults really love good children's books. Watching the street protests, the not young anymore feminist asked, "Why is the focus on policing?" The sustained protest defied pandemic insistence to stay home. Sacred space was created on the streets as the protest focused on criminally charging and defunding the police. But of all the urgent issues, housing, education, low wages, why the focus on policing, and is defunding a wise strategy? The question opened understanding of white privilege. What a white woman thinks based on a fairly benign experience with policing is clearly not what is important or remotely relative to those being killed. Thinking that the job of policing is to protect me is one of so many examples of taking it so for granted that I don't even have to think about it, white privilege. Protesters broke through media spin and demystified the historical connection of policing as integral to the enforcement of slavery. The knee to the neck was of a black man on the ground already subdued by shackles, replicating enforcement of slavery. Who gave authority for enslavement and the policing necessary for enforcement? Witnessing that 9.5-minute horrific footage transports us to Africa and the Slavery Museum of Angola. One room forces you to see together the shackles, the branding iron, the baptismal font, and the window out to the sea where human beings were bound, branded, and baptized and boarded on ships for the Americas. In Africa, the slave trade is depicted by a map with a triangle in the Atlantic Ocean. One point is the place where the dehumanizing journey of chattel slavery begins with capture and confinement. Name this country, and the other 2 points in the triangle will likely still share the same language 5 centuries later. In Angola, the points of connection are Portugal in Europe and Brazil in South America. England to Sierra Leone to the cotton fields of the U.S. make another triangle, and the cotton is processed in the mills of England and ships transport cloth to Africa for more slaves. The slave trade triangle is extremely important to Africa because it points to Europe as the location of the authority giver for enslavement and colonization. Between 1452 and 1493, a series of papal bulls gave authority to claim humans as slaves, subjugate the wisdom and bodies of women, and colonize lands not already claimed by Christian monarchy. European monarchies would rule and extract the resources for wealth development of Africa and the Americas for centuries. When Columbus returned with his discovery of lands with potential great wealth, the king and queen oversaw the political and enforcement authority to take whatever was found in these lands and the right to claim and colonize for the crown. the papal authority, was just as pernicious. It claimed that any peoples who were not baptized Christians could be subjugated and enslaved, and that any people encountered in the newly discovered land who were not ruled by Christian monarchs were not owners of the land or resources. When we demystify the doctrine of discovery, we learn it means the land was vacant, or terra nullius, of persons with worth and dignity. And that kind of discovery means you own it when you step on it. Through centuries of exploitation, the dreams of liberation have always found voice. It is indeed the inextinguishable interdependent dream we all share, and a powerful few thwart. Of all the ideas we could explore for our International Women's Day service, why are we talking about kings, queens, and popes who lived 500 years ago? If we hear the story as one of enduring systemic injustice because moral authority and governmental authority power linked their power, it's not so scary, and we can go on a journey of discovery to renew our dreams, reclaim our dignity, and create a new story for our planet. We decolonize our minds as we examine if our government is still structured so that the wealthy few disproportionately benefit while the rest fight each other for the leftovers. We examine what sustains the immoral authority today that supports sexism, racism, and heterosexism. Theology and the church are not irrelevant. Rather, we unravel and debunk what set oppression in motion. The glue of oppression is the consolidation of governing power with moral power. We recognize immediately when someone speaks truth to power. If we don't understand white privilege, it is almost impossible to consider decolonization. If we think moral authority is a quaint, meaningless phrase, it's almost impossible to consider decolonization as an ethical, principled process for justice, right relation, and reallocation of resources to help everyone flourish. Decolonizing the mind helps people of conscience to find voice and take action for change with moral authority. Our principles are not platitudes. Our dreams are not pie in the sky. They are the moral authority to undo the unholy injustice. We can hold clearly the intersectionality of oppressions and insist that those legislating, policing, creating programs, teaching clearly can say femicide, misogyny, systemic racism, colonization, and white privilege. We can say the names of injustice and learn how to undo the systems of damage and enforcement of such isms. Decolonizing the mind is a tool of survival for folks in solitary confinement and pandemics. It is also a devotional practice sustaining communities of liberation.